The Whitney Reynolds Show said. We're a topic-based talk show that aims to inspire, educate, and impact our viewer through our 30-minute program.
Coming up this season on The Whitney Reynolds Show.
This is Theo Rossi, and I'm a proud ambassador for the Boot Campaign. I can't wait for you guys to learn all about it right now on The Whitney Reynolds Show.
I think that's right. So I think a couple things. There's a lot of veteran nonprofits, but most of them speak to the needs of veterans. And I didn't see a lot in the landscape that was speaking to the aspirations of veterans. So there's a lot of veteran job fairs, which are good. We need those things. There's a lot of VA-sponsored programs to deal with visible wounds, physical wounds, and unseen wounds. We need those things. But I felt like as a veteran who was young and also didn't have those needs, I didn't know where to plug in. And so I think that there's a real opportunity to catalyze the veteran population that doesn't explicitly have needs. They don't want to come and say, I need something, but they have an interest in staying engaged, and they have actually something to give. And so the question for me has always been, what do you do to catalyze on the potential of veterans, particularly young veterans? And I think part of the answer, one of the answers is create something really cool that they are actually interested in wanting to come to. And so that's...
Also was held out for 4 weeks, so the bombs were raining on us for 4 weeks, and then the Nazis entered Warsaw, and immediately our lives changed beyond recognition. Our once peaceful streets were now patrolled by foreign soldiers with whips and guns, and they snapped whips in our homes and streets. They said that we Jewish people were greedy, yet they came into our homes like common thieves and helped themselves to whatever they wanted to. They cut off electric power. They rationed all food. Schools were closed. Books were made illegal. We had no public transportation. We had no telephones. Couldn't reach anyone, even in an emergency.
You learned so much about the culture. And what did you learn about the culture that maybe we might not know?
Oh goodness, I mean, the probably most profound thing that we've learned is also the most simplest and the most obvious, and that is that they really are people just like us. I mean, that is so simple, but when you sit with a dad, so when this Thai guy introduced me to his cousin, and cousin came to the hotel a couple days later, when cousin walked through those double doors at the hotel, by his side, best decision he ever made in his life was his little 6-year-old girl. And before dad made it to my table where I was sitting waiting for him, I was a goner. You know, I knew I was gonna help this dad. I knew I was gonna help this family before they ever made it to my table. And when he sat his little 6-year-old girl there in front of me, she started coloring on a napkin. And we connected, not as Muslim and Christian, but as fathers. You know, we connected as men who love their children, and it was so easy to relate to him in that moment. If I was in that situation in the middle of war with no options, my first thought was, is there anything I wouldn't do to help my daughter? Are there any number of street corners I wouldn't stand on and beg? Are there any number of doors I wouldn't knock on? Is there anything I wouldn't do to help my little girl? And once I felt that and experienced that with him, it made it so easy to respond and join him.
Anymore, because even though I had cancer, my injuries were internal, you know, they would never look at themselves and see a whole person again.
It's amazing how perspective kind of changes where we stand in our own life. So after you got done with the treatment, you're cancer-free, you ran across another hurdle.
Well, I tell you, and people say, you know, what was the hardest part? Was it really cancer? Was it Katrina? And that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was when I got done with my treatment, I was just basically kicked out on the streets. Because I was a woman veteran, there were no supportive services for me or my son. I had no home to go back to. I had no job to go back to. And so basically they said, well, go to the VA. The VA helps veterans. And I'm like, oh, well, I thought the VA was for older Vietnam veterans type men, because that's who you usually heard that get support through the VA. And I went to the VA and they looked at me like I was some type of, you know, foreign matter, like a woman veteran, you know, wow, what do we do with you? But they didn't have any existing program. So they said, oh, by the way, you stated you have a son. I said, yes, I do. And they said, well, you need to go to the welfare office and get on food stamps like all the other single mothers do.
Ooh, how did that feel?
It felt like a huge slap in the face, because we have women that are fighting, bleeding, and dying alongside our brothers, and to just basically be treated like second-class citizens or like someone who doesn't matter, it was very, very hurtful. And, you know, to go to a welfare office and you're a soldier was probably one of the most demeaning experiences that I've had in my life.
Anything else that you would leave our viewers with?
I would just say this, not to shame oneself or to beat on oneself about having a fear, not to keep it secret. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. So not to keep it secret, but to share it with somebody else, because sometimes just putting air and light on a fear will help it dissipate and become more manageable. And the goal is always to get the fear manageable and then start mapping out baby steps. And most fears can be overcome. People have a great life as a result.
So last question for you. If you're a bystander of a fear of someone else and you're seeing that it could be threatening, what would you recommend?
I would say once is information, twice is control. So to point out that you notice this in the other person is loving and kind, not in a shaming or derogatory way, but to say, this is what I observed, and then to offer support or offer some help around it, whatever that person thinks the help would be, and then do that. And if they're not ready to face it, take a look at it, you know, break it down and find baby steps, that you step out of it. So you offer it once and then you let it go.
One of the problems with these guys is that people love little puppies, we all do, and part of the lure of a pet store is that you can get a puppy that's maybe 5 or 6 weeks old, and a lot of people look at that and say, oh, I get to bond with this little newborn puppy. The problem with that is normally a puppy wouldn't even be totally weaned at that age, and so they're not getting the antibodies from their mom. That would also provide them protection to kind of bridge that gap until they have, you know, enough of an immune system to really respond to the vaccines. So it's a combination of being weaned and taken away from mom too early, not getting vaccinated appropriately at an early age, and then not having continued vaccines. And some of these guys are getting vaccinated at the puppy mills, and the vaccines are not refrigerated, they're expired. So they might be getting the vaccine, but who knows if that vaccine's even effective because it's not being stored and handled properly.
And one thing that's important that you just said was that a lot of puppy mills, they don't have veterinarians there, and they might say that they're getting medical treatment, but these are by people who don't, you know, who aren't doctors, and there are some things that can be done by non-doctors and some things that need to be done, and an evaluation of disease is one of those things we need doctors for.
The Whitney Reynolds Show is ready to explore in your area. We're making an impact in our community and are ready to be more in your market. For more information on these episodes or our upcoming season, visit WhitneyReynolds.com. You're watching The Whitney Reynolds Show.